They have food and drink too. That's all I'm saying. We're good? Okay. Yeah. Give me in the middle. I'll call you up. Yeah, I'll call you up first. Yeah. So thank y'all so much for coming. My name is Robin Richard, and I'm excited to have y'all here at the Kakua Institute. We are so grateful and honored to have you here and to be a part of the inaugural exhibit of the Baptiist Town quilt, this magnificent piece of art and love that is behind me. And if you have not gotten a close-up yet, please do that when after our quilter talk. It is magnificent from afar. It's even more magnificent up close. And so I'm just so excited that my good friend, my dear friend, my neighbor, Patricia Gaston, we call her PJ, decided to allowed us to have this here. We're so honored to have her here. So again, just if you'll silence your phones, those of you just coming in, if you'll silence your phones, because we on TV, y'all. That's all I'm saying. We on TV. Okay. And so I do want to first I want to thank all of our volunteers, our Kakua Institute volunteers. If you can raise your hand, thank y'all so much. Thank you so much for all that you do to make this institute available to the community and open to the community. In Swahili, Kakua means growth, and our idea is to discover, share, celebrating growth stories about African Americans in art, history, science, and technology. And so this art exhibition is certainly goes right to the vision that we have for not only for our neighborhood, but for people and for this particular time for this country, because we can use a whole lot of extra love right now. And so we're just so excited to do that. I'm just gonna forgive me for referring to my notes, but I want to make sure that I don't miss a few people. We do have some partners in this. And if you have not had a chance to see the exhibition video, it will continue to run. The first person I want to thank is Eric Sandifer Ayers. She is a professor at Miles College, and she's from Greenwood, and she is doing a film that's making the circuits now called Mission Recompense: Love Letters to a Mississippi Delta. And so she is sharing what Greenwood and what the Delta meant to her through the voices and faces and stories of other people. And so if you get a chance to see her film, please do so. It's in limited edition on YouTube, but you can certainly, if it comes to theaters or whatever, please make sure to see that. The other people I want to thank are also from Greenwood. When they heard about the project, they wanted to know how can they help. And so we're grateful. They're actually they hosted the reception last night, and your goodies today is Emily and Richard Elliott. They have Delta Design Build, excuse me, which is an architectural firm that does public work. And so, and it's public good work too. And they, I don't think either one is from Greenville, but they live there now and stayed there after some studies and work that they did some years ago. And so really trying to see how to reinvest or invest in that, in Greenwoods in general, but in Baptiist Town particularly. And so really grateful to that. And so finally, I want to thank, and they're on their way now. We have some of the Gaston family here, but their children and grandchildren are on their way. I want to thank the Gaston family. So let me just pause and let y'all, while I catch my breath, let y'all give a hand clap to the Gaston family. It is, if you're an artist, if you have a passion that you pour in your heart into, it's a beautiful thing when the family backs you through, diverting resources to your project, to your pet project, to your passion project, whatever it is. And so the Gaston family, I've known them for a number of years, but particularly through this project, I have seen them really wrap their arms around PJ, and from helping, design how we install the quilt, to actually doing the installation, and working throughout their work to do that. And so I'm just really grateful for them. And then the extension of them is the pictures that you see in the video of her family comes from her family from Mississippi, from Florida, from Mississippi, from Ohio, from New York. So for sharing that, and so that their legacy continues to live. So I'm so grateful for them. So can y'all join me again in thanking the Gaston family? Yeah. And so I said a little bit last night, but I want to read this quote directly about the history of African American quilts, that I thought really goes to what PJ has done. And this is from the Black History and Quilting story. It says, Black quilters are primarily responsible for turning the American patchwork quilt into an instrument of storytelling and historical documentation. Prior to that, quilts were primarily used as a function, as a usefulness, as a tool to keep warm or to keep the cold out. And so how many of you have quilts on your bed right now? Yeah. How many of you have quilts on your walls? Quilts on the wall, yeah. And so that for this country is a relatively new thing, and it is attributed to an African American lady by the name of Harriet Powers, who was born during enslavement period, and she quilted. And when a white woman saw her quilt in an exhibit, she literally she said, "Who is this that did this, that elevated this functional work to artwork?" And so Harriet Powers' work is now seen. The two quilts still exist. I believe she died in the early 1900s. Two of her quilts still exist today, and the Smithsonian has that. So because of that, it's gone through some iterations, but because of the Smithsonian acquired those are now in the public trust. Excuse me. And so you can, if you see Harriet Powers' work, you will see how powerful it is in terms of artistry of quilting. And so we know quilts as, again, a way to keep warm, but we also know quilts as a way that they would wrap the dead. So whether it was during the war, or whether it was before, the prominence of commercialized, I would say, funeral homes, then people would, the deceased would lay in the home and be laid over the, and ice would be put up under the table. So it became this cooling board. There's an old gospel song about that. It became a cooling board. I was reminded last night, though, and it was in my notes, that quilts were also used as a way to signal persons who were enslaved, who were trying to gain their freedom. So if you've heard of the Underground Railroad, one of those visual aids was if the place was safe, they would hang a quilt out, and the quilt will have some symbol or something on it, or it would have some direction on it to keep going north, maybe the North Star, something like that. But these were ways, these were goals, just as African American, we have signal songs, wade in the water. What's the gourd? Follow the drinking gourd. Those sort of signal songs. There were also these signal quilts as well. And so those were used. And then along comes this lady that I just absolutely adore. She passed a couple of years ago, named Faith Ringgold. And Faith Ringgold was a public school teacher. I believe she taught art, and maybe something else, but certainly art. And then she was doing art, what I would say regular art, paintings and things like that. And she got into quilting, and she saw it as a way to elevate her Blackness, her womanhood, her Black womanhood. And so she used that to do that, and her quilts are absolutely phenomenal. I have two of her posters because, my husband won't let me spend $30,000 on a quilt. I don't know why. I don't know why. I loves him, but he won't let me spend $30,000 on a quilt. And so, so I have two posters. And so then we see, Faith Ringo as this preeminent quilter in the Black arts movement and just in general for quilting. There's Michael Cummins. Today you see a lot of Bisa Butler is another nationally prominent name. And so, and of course, for Mississippi, it's the G's Bend quilts. And so that's the beautiful thing about this art form is that, number one, that it is an art form, but it's also functional too. So it has a very useful purpose. Now, if PJ said I'm putting this on his bed, I'm breaking into her house. Y'all can call the sheriff and say, come and get this because it's going to be in my house. This will not go on anybody's bed. So when I first saw it, I was like, this is an exhibition piece. This belongs in a museum. And do you agree with me that that's the case? Yeah. Yeah. For children and grandchildren, if I see y'all up under it, I'm going to talk about y'all. And then I'm going to steal the quilts and take it to a museum. So again, thank y'all so much for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you. It's good to see Pastor Burns here. Thank you so much. Raise your hand if you were Pastor Burns, because he said he was bringing, wow, what? All these beautiful young people. And if y'all over the age of 25 like me, nobody's 25? No. Why y'all laughing? Okay. All right. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce this next young lady who will introduce her grandmother. I call her Miss Hazel because we share a birthday, and Miss Hazel is older than me. So because I grew up in the South, I say Miss Hazel. So please welcome Miss Hazel Gaston, who is the granddaughter of Patricia Gaston. She got it, PJ. She got it. That's a grandma for you.
Hello, my name is Hazel Gaston, and I'm going to be talking about my Mima Patricia Gaston. Patricia J. Gaston was born in 1956 in a neighborhood called Baptiist Town in Greenwood, Mississippi. Her mother, a licensed hairdresser, and her father, an oil mill worker, raised Patricia and her 9 siblings in the close-knit and predominantly African American community. With multi-generations and relatives all around her, the community was a safe place amidst the backdrop of Mississippi entrenched racial and often violent climate. Patricia was also raised by her elder sisters in Ohio and New York and educated in her primary years and secondary years in Greenwood, Mississippi, Cleveland, Ohio, and Syracuse, New York. She graduated high school in Syracuse and attended Mississippi Valley State University. After a career in advertising and publishing administration, she retired from AT&T in 2012 in Atlanta, Georgia. Patricia moved to Pensacola and expanded her hobbies of gardening, beekeeping, birding, photographing, and quilting. Additionally, she is the author of 3 children's books. How Do You Know When It's Time to Go to Bed? Published in 1998. What's That in the Sky Up, Up, Up High? Which was published in 2012. And Let's Go to the Park Before It Gets Dark, which was published in 2023. Each book was illustrated by her son, Carter J. Gaston. As a quilter for over 5 decades, Patricia makes her quilts for practical and artistic uses. The Baptiist Town quilt, made over the last 6 years, is her latest and largest quilt to date.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Thank you, Hazel, Miss Hazel, correction. Okay. I want to start off by thanking Robin. Robin is a neighbor, a gardening buddy, a sister friend. And a few months ago, she came by my house, and I had my work spread it out working on it. And she looked at it and said, PJ, where are you going to hang this? I said, I have no idea. I'm just trying to finish making it now. And she looked at it again and said, it should be hung in a museum. And I said, you think, Robin? Thank you. She said, yes. She said, we've got to have it down at the Villas. So it's making its debut here at the Kukua Institute. Thank you, Robin. Oh, okay, bear with me. Two of my three adult kids are here with me. My sons and my daughter couldn't make it. She's out west. Y'all can hold your hands up so they'll know who you are. I have one of my 6 or 7 granddaughters. Two of my 6 or 7 granddaughters, Miss Dana, Miss Hazel, and I have a grandson somewhere around here, Mr. Cassius. So I've written several introductions for my quilt, so just bear with me if I go blank. I was born and raised in Greenwood, Mississippi. A few years ago, well, when I put my quilt together and I was working on the story, I asked one of my nephews to describe Baptiist Town for me. He's 3 years older than me, my oldest nephew. So he said Baptiist Town was a close-knit community. He said everybody in Baptiist Town knew everybody. Everybody looked out for everybody. And if you were a kid out and about doing something or saying something you had no business doing or saying, by the time you got home, chances were your parents had heard about it. Boy, what you doing out there cursing? Yeah, I got a call. That's how it was for us living in Baptiist Town. There were no sidewalks in Baptiist Town, just paved streets, roads, paths, and alleys. It's set in a section of Greenwood, bordered or sectioned off with the east and the westbound railroad tracks, and the north and the southbound railroad tracks. And on the east side of the community sat the Federal Compress. And as a little kid, the Federal Compress, when I'm walking down the street and looking over the houses, I could see the building, and it seemed to have stretched from one end of the community to the other. So that's why the red and black building up at the top is the Federal Compress. And that's why I have it so long, because as a kid, that's how long it seemed. I could never see the ending of the building. And then on the north side of the community, behind a section they call White Bottom, and I don't know how it got that name, the White Bottom, but it's set behind Walker Street. It was called the Palucia Bayou, what's behind there. So this is how Baptiist Town was sectioned off in the town of Greenwood. So my story starts with a little girl sitting on her porch, Tommy and Nick's youngest child, and she realized that she started calling out her neighbors name by name. And she said, Miss Cindy lives here, Aunt Emma lives here, Miss Bessie and Miss Benton live here. So she realized that she's learning her neighbors. So she would sit out and name them, and on another week or day, she would do the same thing. She would see how many of the neighbors she knew or had come to know. Neighbors who had known her before she was born, and neighbors that she come to know as she was growing. I want to, as children growing up in Baptiist Town, you heard a lot in the 60s about hardships and segregation and different things that were going on. But as kids in Baptiist Town, we were allowed to be kids. Our daily lives consisted of going to school during the day, and at night we did our homework and chores. And our life consisted of going to church on Sundays, going to church service, going to revival, Bible study, and when we were old enough, joined the children's choir. So I kind of made me some little cheat notes to kind of help me out. What inspired this was I've always thought of my family and the community coming up. And over the years, I would write and journal about my family and the community. And a few years ago, I said to one of my sisters, I think I'll just create a quilt of the community. And I'll make it overview like you're looking down on the community. And at first, I was only going to probably talk about the 4 streets that I was familiar with. But as I looked at the map of the community and I saw how much bigger it was, then my work grew with working on the quilt. So I'm going to jump around and share some things that are on the quilt. At the top, the white flower is our state flower, the magnolia. The birds are our state birds, Mississippi, the mockingbirds in Mississippi. At the top in the corner, the left corner, the patchwork is from one of my mother's quilt pieces that she made. And I took a section out to put up there. In this community, in the 60s, there were the brown buildings represent stores in the community. And the stores were owned by a mixture of people. We had a couple of Koreans and Asian stores in the community. We had 2 white families that had stores in the community. They opened their stores up during the day, but they lived somewhere else at night. But the Asians and the Koreans who had stores in this community, they lived there during the day, opened up, and at night they would live behind the store or in the store in the community. Out of this community of about 300 to 400 houses and families were about an average of 5 or 6 stores. Stores and a couple of cafes. in here. And out of the 5 or 6 grocery stores, to my knowledge, one was operated by a Black family, the Shaws. I learned my quilting from my mama. I can remember at an early age when she asked me to thread a needle for her. And then a few years later, she started asking me to sew 2 pieces of fabric together for her. And she would only give me 2 at a time, 2 at a time. And then she would connect the rest of them. So I did this as young as probably 9 or 10 years old. And then by the time I was a teenager, I was still interested in quilting. And by this time, I could help her more with the quilt. When my mother was making quilts when I was young, they didn't have the batting that they have today. So we would use cotton, and she would take the cotton and spread it out on the to make the quilt between the 2 layers. That's how they did the batting back then. And they probably had other things they did, like maybe put an extra sheet in the middle to make it heavier. But when my mother was quilting, it was for cover for us. But more so today, it's more of art. And it's still cover for some, but it's more of art. A lot of it is done. A lot of things that in the 60s, they talked a lot about the farmers and sharecroppers. But people had other jobs and skills too. And even within this community, my neighbors had different jobs. Mr. Benner was a carpenter. His wife was a cook at the private schools. We had a nurse in the community. We had a mechanic in the community, plumbers. So we had all these other skills as well, barbers, beautician, people did laundry in the homes for people. They would drop their laundries off for people to wash and press for them, and then come and pick the laundry up. What else I want to share? My father worked at the Federal Compress, and he worked at night. He had to walk the tracks at night to get over the trestle, over the bayou, to get to the planter's ore mill. So I was teasing one of my older sisters, 8 years older than me, because she would be so terrified to walk over the bayou or over the bridge. And I said, think about it. Dad had to do this every night. No lights or anything, just by the moon. And it was dangerous back then. But he did it for probably 20, 30 years before he retired. And if any questions at time, or just continue? Okay. Also in the 60s, I had an introduction to sharecroppers. One morning, my mother woke me up early, Saturday morning, and I saw this tall man standing in the door. Excuse me. I saw this tall man standing in the door. And then a few minutes later, he disappeared. and Mama was waking me up. Get up, we got to get the house ready. Now we lived in a shotgun house, so the front room was used for a living room during the day and a bedroom at night. If you had a big family and had to rearrange things like this. So Mom was waking me up to make the bed up, let the curtains up, let the blinds up, open the curtains. So a few minutes later, after she got the house situated, he comes back with 2 or 3 girls, and they're carrying bushels of stuff. And then a couple of boys, and they're carrying an armful of stuff. And then his wife and him, and they're carrying. And I said, Mom, what are they doing? So later that day or that week, I said, Mom, what were those people doing? She said they were sharecroppers. She said they didn't have money to pay me. So they were offering food to pay me. He wanted her to do his wife and his daughter's hair. And that's how they paid back then. They called it bartering, if I'm saying it correctly. So that's how I was introduced to sharecroppers. And I asked my mom, because I knew my grandparents were farmers at one time. So I asked my mom, were they sharecroppers? And she said, no, honey, you can't make no money being a sharecropper. So that's how I learned about sharecroppers. Now, although we lived in Baptiist Town and it was during segregation, our life extended beyond the tracks of Baptiist Town into the town and the city of Greenwood, into Memphis, Tennessee, when we would travel, when I would travel with my mom, and we have a layover in Memphis, Tennessee. And our cousin Bill would come and either sit with us at the bus station or take us to his house to eat and sit and rest until our next bus. And I can remember on one of the trips, when it was time for our bus to leave, Bill sat me in the front seat of the bus and said, you sit right here. You don't have to move for anyone. You sit here and enjoy the view. And I was like, okay, well, I was just a little kid. And I thought nothing of that. But when I got older and started reading about the civil rights, and realized that a few years prior to that was when they had ended the bus boycott nationwide. So we didn't have to move to the back of the bus anymore or pay in the front and whatever they were doing back then. And yes, it was still doing segregation, segregated schools, segregated restaurants, segregated doctor's offices. Some people think, oh, well, that was 100 years ago. No, it was when I was a little kid. And our lives extended beyond Baptiist Town into Cleveland, Ohio, where I got to go and live and visit with some of my older sisters and got to see my uncles and my aunts. And from Cleveland, 2 or 3 carloads would go to Memphis, Flint, Michigan, to visit my older sister. And I don't remember or know anything about no Green Book or anything like that, but we had opportunities to safely travel. We didn't experience some things that others may have experienced. The segregated bus station in Greenwood, it was, the front of the building had 3 doors. On the left side was the black entrance, and on the right side was the white entrance, and in the middle was the cashier and the entrance for the employees, the bus drivers, when they go through there. So my mother and I was on one of our trips, and sometimes kids really don't know anything about segregation and whatever. They just living unless someone tell them or they're exposed to something. Other than that, they're just living. So we were standing in line at the Greyhound bus station, and you could see the cashier had windows on both sides with bars, but you could see straight through to the other side. So I noticed that it was only 4 or 5 people in line on the other side. And there was a lot of us over here. So I said to Mom, not knowing about segregation, it says people over there, why we can't go over there? She said, you let me handle this. That's how she talked. She didn't say, girl, we can't go over there. That's not, we can't go over there. Forgive me. She didn't say that. She just said, you let me handle this. And I said, okay. So that was, but we never had a bad experience traveling as for on the Greyhound. I've had a more frightening experience since I've been an adult than I had back then. Okay. Let's see what else I want to share. So as I started learning, not learning, let me share something else. The pictures on this side and the articles are from some of my mama's records. At the top, I have, I'm with my parents at my high school graduation. And under there, I have a picture of my mom and my grandmama. And I have a picture of my mother, who was a beautician, doing her sister's hair. And under there is an article from 1964. So they used to print their little flyers, type them up. And I was telling one of my older sisters that I had this paper from Mama's records, and I was reading it to her. And it was telling how the police had dragged this Black woman who was boycotting or picketing. And so my sister said, who name on it? Who typed it? I said, I don't see that. Why? She said, I used to type some of those articles. So that's an article from my mama's record. And it didn't have who actually typed that particular page. Under there is a picture of a neighbor and her youth choir that she started. So I mentioned that I started knowing my neighbors and recognizing my neighbors. My earliest memory of Miss Cindy was when I was home and I heard some noise or a sound. And I asked my mom, what is that sound? She said, that's Cindy banging on the piano. And I was like, okay. Well, later on, Cindy asked her if her 2 daughters could join her youth choir. She wanted a girls' choir, and Mama agreed to it. So they became the Gullich Sisters, and they sung for about 3 or 4 years with the group until they graduated and moved north. And this These articles are from a 1924 scrapbook from New Zion Baptist Church. And that's the church where about 4 generations on my mama's side attended church. And in that scrapbook from 1925, they have a tribute to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my mother's grandfather, Walter B. Burton. And they said at the time of his death, they did not have a picture of him. So they put his casket in the front of the church, and the deacon board stood behind the casket to take pictures. And then another classroom stood behind the casket to take a picture. And someone said, "Oh, he must have been a famous person." I said, I don't think so. I think just an everyday person. But I did not know him personally. He died way before I was born. I have on here the church, New Zion Baptist Church, and 2 plaques that are on the building, or signs that are on the building. And they both mention either my great-grandfather, Walter B. Burton, or his son, who both were very active in the church at New Zion. I also put the cotton on here because Mississippi was the king of cotton at one time. And a lot of people get triggered when people talk about cotton because of what they experienced or heard or whatever. But I never thought of cotton like that. I just thought of it as a plant, but nobody made me pick it. So I asked one of my older sisters. I knew there were 10 of us. There were 5 girls, and then it was a 13-year dip break, and then 5 more kids. So I asked a sister who was 8 years older than me, "Did y'all have to go pick cotton?" She said, "We went a couple of times." I said, "Tell me about it." She said, "Daddy took about 3 or 4 of us to pick cotton." And she said, at the end of the day, we hadn't picked 100 pounds between the 4 of us. And Daddy was so disappointed. He talked about us because she said, "But our cousin Dave now, they could pick 200-300 pounds of cotton each." She said, "But we couldn't. All 4 of us together didn't pick 100 pounds. And I could imagine Dad probably said, "Y'all ain't worth the salt to go in your bread." That's what he liked to say. "Y'all not worth the salt to go in your bread." I said, "Well, did you have to go back?" She said, "We went a couple of times." Then Dad probably said, "I don't need to be bothered with y'all." But to my knowledge, at least by the time I came along, my parents didn't have to pick cotton. Like I said, my mom was a beautician and my dad worked at the oil mill. But yes, they did. They have picked cotton, but they also worked for a living. I do want to say that while I was working on this, Robin said, well, when are you going to finish it?" I said, "I'm trying, Robin, but I keep thinking of stuff." And she was like, "Well, you're going to have to close it up." She said, "That's when you have to have a chapter 2. I said, "You're going to have a chapter 2 of a quilt." So with my dreams of sharing stories about my neighbors, like Miss Betsy and Mr. Benton, who knew me before I knew myself. When I was teenagers, and I was at home, Mr. Benton brought his wife to get her hair done. Now, this didn't dawn on me until I was older. They only lived 3 doors down, but he would drive her to Mama's to get her hair done and say what time I need to pick her up. And I so what I was thinking about was when they were at the house, he and his wife, and he looked at me and he said, I remember when you were a baby. You were on that bed, all scaly and sick, and your mama trying to do people hair, and the customer taking you, trying to comfort you so your mama could work. He said, you were pitiful. He said, you were a pitiful sight. I'm sorry. But he said, look at you now. You turned out to be a nice looking young lady. And his wife want to get in on the storytelling too. So Miss Bessie said, well, this had nothing to do when I was a baby, but Miss Bessie said, well, I remember when Ree came knocking on the door. Ree is my sister, 6 years older than me. And she said, I was just stepping out of the tub, and I heard this boom, 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 boom. And I was put my house coat on. That's what they call the robe and the stuff. Put my house coat on. And I heard Miss Bessie, they after me. The police after me. So Miss Bessie said, I opened the door, and I told Reed, get under the bed. Now, she wasn't trying to harbor a fugitive, so let me give a little more about the story. They were boycotting the stores in the community who was there making a living off of us and disrespecting our parents and whatever. So they was like, no, you don't need to be here. So they were boycotting a couple of the stores, and they would have what they call a black bus when the store called for them, because the people were out there boycotting. They would see they would send the bus for them. So they had people watching because they knew they had to come across the track to get into the community. So when someone saw the black bus, they would say, the bus is coming, the bus is coming. And then everybody started running in the community trying to get home or wherever they needed to go. So Miss Bessie was sharing about when Ree came knocking on her door. So she told her to get under the bed and stay quiet. And then she would watch. And when she felt they had left, she told Ree, come under the bed and you go straight home. Now they lived here. So Ree had to run 3 doors down to get in the house. Well, we found out Ree made it okay, but a friend of hers who is in this picture with her got caught. And she said the people were saying, where your friend? Where she live? And said, I don't know. Yes, you do, where she live. But she never told on her. So it's stories like that in chapter 2 of the quilt. So what I want to do as I put the house numbers on the houses of the people that I'm talking about, I will record what I'm saying about them and post them as I go along. Thank you.
Would y'all join me in thanking Patricia? PJ, yeah. So we want to take question and answer, and again, just because we're okay, let me finish, Geraldine. Just because we're doing this, we've asked Patricia, she's going to repeat the question. So there are people who are watching on YouTube and Facebook. So if you repeat the question, she'll do that, and then I'll come back up.
Okay.
You need water? You good?
The water. Yes, ma'am.
Music. The musicians playing instruments in your neighborhood on the porch. You know, it's Mississippi we're talking about. The Delta. Please.
Well, I don't have any stories within my story to tell about the blues.
Just music. I mean, music.
Ma'am?
I mean, music.
And the music happening in the 60s? Of course it was. Yes. Now, although when we were coming up as a kid, although we watched Lawrence Welk on TV, Hee Haw, and whatever they were showing, at home we were playing 45s. At home we were playing B.B. King, Otis Redding, Aretha Franklin, The Temptation on the 45. And when we would go north, they would take music up there to share if they heard about it. And if they came out in the north, they'll bring a 45 home so we could listen to the music. So, yeah. Now, there are blues musicians who have come from there that are recognized in the community, and they put stature. I think like Mr. Johnson or Robert Johnson. We have actors from here, not necessarily Baptiist Town, but Morgan Freeman is from this area. And Mississippi have a lot of writers and musicians and artists and authors. So, any more? Yes, sir.
Can you tell us something about the cotton in that area? When I was a kid, I remember summers and walking through a cotton field to get to the grocery store. Can you tell us something about the shoe?
Well, funny that you mentioned that, because I had told Miss Robin I didn't see any cotton when in the community when I was coming up, but it was the king of cotton. But it was out on the highway. It wasn't necessarily in the community. So he was talking. So when he was telling Robin about going to the store and seeing cotton, we're like, where you see cotton? Oh, you making me look bad because I done told him what no cotton there. So he was like, Mom, we used to walk through the cotton field to go to Piggly Wiggly. And I'm still trying to figure it out. What cotton? He said, when we were at Uncle's house. I was like, oh, Uncle wasn't living in Baptiist Town then. So the cotton was out on Medoc Road somewhere in the county, and that's where he saw it. So I didn't have to go pick cotton or anything. Is that why you asking about the cotton? Oh, so you just want. Mm-hmm. The green wood. which is much bigger. This is not a town, this is a community. So within Greenwood, yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about what church was like? You mentioned there was a lot of revivals and church services that you have to go to. What did church feel like for you in that time?
Ooh, church always felt it was something different that moved you and was different. I mean, when they had revival and they had the people humming and saying words and you don't know what they're saying, but it sounds good. So you just going along with it as a kid. You know, revival, we were baptized. Actually, we were baptized in the church compared to people who were baptized in the bayou or the Yazoo River. The church had a pool under where the preachers, what sanctuary was. And they would move everything the night before. And then you have a pool of water to be baptized in. The music was different than it is today. The type of songs were different than.
Can you give us a sample of those songs?
Who's asking me that? No. If I could, believe me, I would. I would. No, I can't give you an example. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And it just moves you, you know. And I like music today, but I don't like when they mix it too much, like dancing music. That's just me personally. I like the good old fashioned gospel music. Did they do what? I don't remember that. I don't, but they may have. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Guest,
Ma'am.
the very top thing, would you talk about look like different children of different colors?
The
Can you talk
kids?
about that, kids?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, ma'am. And the community was an open lot. It probably were houses there years ago, but it was open lot. And the boys would get together there and play. Only the boys. And they had nicknames for themselves. You know how guys are. Oh, you duck looking? Well, his nickname became Duck. No, Tater. I had a brother, they nicknamed him Tater because his head was shaped like a potato. I had a brother they called Sheep because his hair, he wore a big afro and he liked his afro and it was woolly, so they called him Sheep. They had a friend, and some of them, 2 or 3 of them are still communicating today, but both of my brothers are gone. They had nickname like Hands because one of the boys would hold basketball, he could just grab it with one hand, so they called him Hands. Somebody was named Ubo. I don't even know how that's spelled. And they probably carried those nicknames with each other until they got in high school. And then, you know, once you get grown, you know, don't be calling me that. Like we had a cousin, they called him Newt. And when he left and came back home from Chicago, he was like, I'm James. Ain't no Newt. Don't call me that no more. So although it was a house predominantly with, community with shotgun houses. There were a few nice sized homes too in the community. So I showed them by making them a little bigger, like they were. But you probably could count them on both hands in the most of them. And they're making, I used to think in the 80s or maybe 70s that this is the last of the shotgun houses. But no, they're building them and they're calling them tiny homes or small houses because people don't need all that extra stuff. Some people don't. Yes.
In those times of repression and going through all that violence,
Those times of oppression and going through those violent.
what kept you motivated as, as a Black woman, what kept you motivated to keep pushing and going forward?
You make me think of my grandson. My grandson said, "Meanwhile, tell me how it was back in the day with y'all." I said, "Back in what day?" Although the races and the violence was going on, me and my peers didn't necessarily experience that. I don't know if it was because we were sheltered from it or because they had done so much mess in the 50s. By the mid to late 60s, it had calmed down some. So we didn't experience that. When you hear stories like Maya Angelou telling about how the cage first thing, she had to hide her brother in the potato bin till the people go by. We didn't experience that. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but we didn't experience that. And yes, ma'am.
Did
My mom.
Did your mom ever tell you stories about what she went through, or was she an activist as her time? Did she ever boycott with everybody else?
Did my mom ever tell me about what they may have experienced and if she participated in the civil rights? Well, I can remember my mama doing my hair. And I don't know if I can remember when Dr. King was assassinated. I can remember when Robert Kennedy was assassinated. We had a lot of assassinations, bombings of the church, things that I heard about. But I can remember asking my mom, "How did you all get along with the white people?" She said, "Our motto was, you don't mess with us and we won't mess with you." And that's really all I can remember hearing and asking her about that. Now my older sisters, they had a completely different lifestyle. Like Ron said, the second oldest sister shared that she went to pick cotton and a man had a horse trying to make her move faster. And she went home and told mama what he did and said, "I can't do this." And she said a few days later, my older sister had sent her a train ticket to come to Michigan. She never went back to live, but she would always come back to visit as long as our parents was there. Some people would leave bitter from whatever they experienced or whatever they experienced, but we always, as long as our parents was there, this was home, and we always went back to home. Now, as far as my mama participating, I do know that she went to meetings and participated. She had let one of our older sisters come and get us. So my sister got me and two other sisters and took us to Cleveland to attend school for a year. And while we were up there, my sister, who's 8 years older than me, was, I think she said she was attending Phyllis Wheatley YMCA after school or something. And one of the women there befriended her because she knew she was from out of town and visiting. And she knew she was from Mississippi. So she heard Dr. King was coming to speak in Cleveland. We were in Cleveland, Ohio by then. And she wanted to take my sister to hear Dr. King because he was going to be talking about the South and what was going on in Mississippi. So she got my sister's permission to take my other sister to see Dr. King, and she did. And when we returned home to Mississippi, according to my sister, she asked Mom if they could participate in the civil rights and the boycotts. And when you run across the story when Dr. King came to Greenwood and there were people following him around town, two of my sisters were with that crowd. And my sister said, we were expecting 1,000 people, but only 500 showed up. You couldn't tell from the pictures that I saw. So they definitely supported and did their part in their way. But my sisters boycotted for 3 or 4 years before they graduated and went to high school. And people don't think about back then, when you weren't allowed to go into stores, where did people get their clothes from? How did they get clothes? And I started thinking about that. And I said, Barbara, where did you all get your clothes from when you couldn't go to the store to shop? And she really hadn't even given that a thought. And she thought about it and she said, well, you know, Miss Ollie next door, Miss Ollie stayed on the other side of us. She said she used to make our clothes. She made clothes for us all while we were boycotting. The summers we were boycotting. And she said, Lucy, our oldest sister, she would send us clothes. And she did. She would send us clothes for school. And if we were up there, we didn't come back home until after Labor Day because we had to shop, get our Labor Day clothes. We always came back late because we had to do whatever. Well, I won't say always, but, you know, from the travel. So they got their clothes from other places or clothes being made. And so, any more? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
First, thank you for being here and for telling your story. I have 3 questions.
Yes, ma'am. One at a time. Okay.
Do you think quilting, specifically storytelling through quilting, is becoming a lost art?
Do I think quilting becoming a lost art? Oh, no. Not from what I see.
Okay, so number 2 is, do you teach quilting?
No, ma'am. I can teach you how to put little squares together, but and actually make. Well, I won't say I couldn't, but.
So my 3rd question: you here, family here, you have grandchildren. This is a wonderful event. How do you see, or how do you envision your legacy?
How do I vision my legacy? I don't know. I don't think about that. I guess maybe not anymore. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, I probably thought of some things, but I don't know. My daughter, I don't think she would, not necessarily, let me see how to say this. she would hear me talk about my work and my quilt and just listen. But last year, when I started talking to her about the quilt or the family, I started hearing, this is being recorded. And I'm like, what do you, well, I can't remember all this stuff you saying. So for the past year, if I started talking about the family, the quilt, you're being recorded. So I don't know what they're gonna do. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna say, do you think your legacy will live on through your granddaughter?
Well, it may, because she's an aspiring writer and school teacher.
She likes to cook just now. She said yes. I don't know what she just said that to me.
I just, I sew, but I've never made a quilt.
Mhm.
Okay.
Help me out.
How long does it take you to quilt? So once you talk about the process of quilting, how long?
Oh, to be honest with you, I have no idea. Did I talk about my magnolia up there? I was gonna look for a print with a magnolia, and then I said, why don't I just make one? So I made my magnolia. The gray house up there near the guys playing in the park was where my grandparents had a house. My grandparents lived there. But I didn't find out exactly where the house was until the past couple of years ago. Because my older sisters would say, oh, I used to love that house we lived in. It was so big. And I would love it. And she would tell about how when they were the older five, their times were probably harder than the younger five. They said they always had to help, said we always had pigs, geese, ducks, chickens, and the kids had to help take care of them. Well, we got tired of taking care of those chickens. So one day I decided, this is what my second older sister was sharing. I decided to put some of those things in a Kroger sack and took them down and threw them in the bayou. And one of the neighbors saw her and called my grandmama. She said she got a whooping a whole week for that. A whole week for putting those things in the bayou. And then another sister was sharing when they lived in that house, said they put the cat in the Kroger sack and went and threw it in the bayou. And she said when she woke up in the middle of the night, that cat had come back and scratched her. She said that happened. Yeah, so my sisters, they would just get together and just share stories about when they were coming up. And I have recordings of them sharing stories. And one of the older sisters said they were they were at home about midnight. Somebody knocked on the door and said, you got any gals in there? And they said, my grandma said, if you don't get away from my door, I'll kill you. And he left. So the Caucasians would go in the community looking for gals, I guess, whatever that is. Yeah, so, okay. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, sir. There are a lot of young people here.
What would you say to them about recognizing the area they grow up in, paying attention and the importance of appreciating where you come from.
The importance of appreciating where you come from. Ooh. I don't know what I could share, but I know that sometimes I say people don't realize that things they did in the 50s, in the 60s, what they were going through, they made things better for us when we came along in the 70s and the 80s. And documents show that. Prior to the 60s or prior to the 70s, you couldn't even get a job at certain companies and businesses and hospitals. Even if you were a Black doctor, if you heard Gifted Hands or some of the other stories, they weren't even allowed to go through the front door. They had to go in the back. So different people experience different things. They may not even have a reason to, well, I won't say they won't have a reason to think about things that I don't know. I don't know what encouraging words I could give, because